Today we're talking about the Barents Sea, a very interesting part of Arctica. The Barents Sea borders with northern Europe and it sweeps the coast of Russia and Norway, as well as the archipelagos Spitsbergen, Franz Josef and the land Novaya Zemlya. The peculiarity of the Barents Sea is created by its numerous islands, its rugged shorelines, the various capes, fjords, groves and bays, and also the strange discoveries at the bottom of the sea itself. Based on all research available to the public, we still really know very little about the sea. Even the Russians and Norwegians know very little, but they seem to be most interested in the well-being of this body of water. 2 Russian submarines sadly perished in the Barents Sea in fairly recent times. There was the Kursk and then the most mysterious Losharik. The second submarine, the Losharik, was opening on a very special secret mission, and a number of top Russian naval specialists perished in that disaster. It has been suggested that part of its mission was to possibly study some very unusual phenomena at the bottom of the Barents Sea. The Barents Sea is relatively shallow, with an average depth being 222 meters or 728 feet, and its maximum level reaching only 600 meters, which is about 1968 feet. In the Middle Ages, the Barents Sea was depicted on geographical maps and international treaties under different names. Throughout its history, it's been called the North Sea, the Mormon Sea, the Kavyasko Sea, the Arctic Sea, and even the Moscow Sea. The Russian name Barents Sea was in honor of the famous navigator and traveler who died there. He was ultimately adopted by the Soviets in the Soviet Union era. The Barents Sea belongs to the Arctic Seas, and there is only one which remains ice-free. The sea is greatly influenced by the warm waters of the Gulf Stream, and as a result of this, its southern and western parts, which comprise a quarter of the total sea surface, do not freeze over. This warm stream prevents the formation of old ice. Only the northern part of the sea is covered with old floes and contains detached icebergs. In 1993, Russian geologists discovered an iridium anomaly. Later, their Norwegian colleagues proved that this anomaly had appeared as a result of a huge asteroid, which was 2 kilometers or 1.2 miles in diameter. This asteroid fell into the Barents Sea more than 140 million years ago, and its explosion and tsunami it caused were so devastating that marks left by the meteorite are still evident on the surface of the distant territories of modern France. In modern times, heavy metals and organic contaminants of man-made origin have been observed in both sediments and organisms at different traffic levels. In recent years, there has been some public concern both in Norway and Russia over the possibility of radioactive pollution. Nuclear power plants, nuclear vessels and nuclear weapons are present in the area, and they produce radioactive waste. Reports of this waste have influenced public opinions in many countries. There have also been many stories of UFO sightings over the Barents Sea. Russian sources speak about symbols, and although most of it is Norwegian in origin, it's very hard to find any confirmation on these symbols phenomena. Cartographers from the Norwegian Institute of Marine Research have discovered strange shapes at the bottom of the Barents Sea. This figure 9 here, for example, was found at a depth of 250 meters in the northwest of the province of Finnmark. It measures about 1,000 meters across. The depth of the symbol or numbers track at 8 meters. According to Hannah Hug Nesdal, the project manager of Marineo, they saw many different drawings or tracks in the seabed in the shape of hearts and drawings resembling animal figures, huge arrows, and traces of what looked like tram wheels. The Marineo mapping records the depth and topography, the sediment composition, the biodiversity habitats, and the biotypes and the levels of pollution of the seabed in the Norwegian coastline and offshore regions. Marineo is coordinated by the Institute of Marine Research in collaboration with the Geological Survey of Norway and their Norwegian Hydrographic Service. The first hypothesis of these researchers about the appearance of these strange symbols was that they were thought that they were traces of trawls from fishing vessels, but it was quickly discarded as trawlers do not at all particularly leave traces visible to the radar on the bottom of the sea, and they cannot be compared with what is there in size. So they came to the conclusion that these numerous lines were left by icebergs, many of which on the lower underwater parts may have had pointed edges or even a single point. Theoretically, they would be capable of leaving such a trace. However, in addition to the indented lines, there are also convex or raised lines, as you can see in one of the photos. These raised areas are more than 170 meters wide and 6 meters high, and it's not yet clear what kind of icebergs could have left them. Apparently at the bottom of the Barents Sea, you can see that there are more of these impressive footprints visible on the Google Earth maps. The length of these lines is about 800 kilometers, and they are 1 to 2 kilometers wide. We don't have the answer as to who or what left them. The Barents Sea is located within the continental shoal, but unlike other similar seas, most of it has a depth of 300 to 400 meters, an average depth of 220 meters, and a maximum of 600 meters. The story of giant underwater craters found at the bottom of the Barents Sea will possibly help solve the mystery of the Bermuda Triangle. According to some scientists, the Norwegian Arctic University reports that the objects found down there are located off the coast of Norway at about a 45-meter depth. These giant craters reach 800 meters. Geologists believe that these craters were formed as a result of large gas bursts. In their opinion, the release of methane provokes powerful underwater explosions called undex. These explosions melt ice and underground deposits, creating gas which bursts violently to the surface. At the same time, its volume increases by 150 times, the water temperature rises significantly, and dangerous vortices are born in the atmosphere. This process is very dangerous for ships and aircraft, which can crash due to pneumo collapse. The authors of the study believe that this theory can explain the phenomenon of the Bermuda Triangle, in which 100 ships have mysteriously disappeared over the past century. For confirmation of this, however, it's necessary to find similar craters on the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean in the areas bounded by Bermuda, Puerto Rico, and Florida. Such an expedition is not planned for the foreseeable future yet, however, and scientists intend to concentrate on studying the craters of the Barents Sea for now. Keep in mind, as was mentioned before, there were Soviet submarines on secret missions, or maybe they were not so secret to the Americans. We also found things around the Yucatan Peninsula and the Caribbean Sea, and there is still information coming to light about the strange carvings or tracks underwater that were discovered in Bermuda, Florida, and Puerto Rico, as there are, of course, American submarines researching and operating there. Let's go further back in time, when part of the ancient supercontinent, or Pangea, is still hidden under the Barents Sea. Pangea, or Pangea, was a supercontinent that existed during the late Paleozoic and early Mesozoic eras. It's assembled from earlier continental units approximately 335 million years ago and began to break apart 175 million years ago. In contrast to the present Earth and its distribution of continental mass, Pangea was centered on the equator and surrounded by the superocean Panthalassa. Pangea is the most recent supercontinent to have existed and the first to be reconstructed by geologists. The discovery was made by Norwegian scientists after studying the results of seismic studies and data obtained after drilling wells. They restored a picture of rocks and sediments that formed over millions of years. According to new scientists, it turned out that in the era of the dinosaurs, the largest river delta in the history of the planet was located on the site of the sea. It was 10 times the size of the Amazon Delta. The delta existed 227 to 237 million years ago during the Triassic period. Its area covered the entire modern Barents Sea, and it was 1.65 square kilometers, or 1% of the total land area. Deltas are formed when a river carries sediment downstream and then dumps it on the coast. These deposits eventually form fertile plains for plants and animals. The ancient delta was located on the northern coast of Pangea. It was fed by numerous streams that arose due to monsoon rains and flowed to the shore from the mountain ranges located to the south. Scientists have not yet been able to determine what kind of animals lived in that place, but it can be assumed that amphibians thrive there and labyrinthodonts, which would have chosen a wetland environment. Vegetation included many ferns and sparse coniferous trees, and the coastal waters were inhabited by pelycosaurs and ichthyosaurs. Most of the rest of Pangea was much less hospitable, as the area of the equator there were dry and hot deserts, so the delta would have been almost the only cradle of life. It has been steadily expanding for 2 to 5 million years. It can be concluded that the sea level remained relatively stable. This corresponds to the early theory that in the Triassic period there was a stable greenhouse climate with no ice caps at the poles. Earlier, it was reported that traces of the ancient supercontinent were found under the waters of the Indian Ocean. There is a huge importance in relation to the Arctic for Russia. You hear a lot in the news about Russia becoming more militarized, and of course the West is looking to restrain it, or vice versa. During Soviet times, there were very unusual fortifications created or built, as if in some kind of preparation for something big. It's speculated that Russia's wealth will grow exponentially, not only in Siberia, but also in the Arctic. This is a very important territory for Russia, and according to many estimates, almost a quarter of the planet's hydrocarbons are concentrated there. This assumption is corroborated by the fact that there used to be warm seas, tropical greenery, and moist forest, because without this, there's no coal, oil, or gas. Also, the legends of Hyperborea and Arctida are well-founded according to a number of researchers, and on ancient maps, Greenland, Svalbard, Franz Josef Land, and Novaya Zemlya formed an arc. Inside this was the location of the current Barents Sea. It was probably still warm at the time. Maybe an ancient civilization existed in those mysterious lands, and the remaining evidence of these civilizations are the caves, mines, stones, shrines, and pyramids. Rumors of possible conflict between the United States and Russia seem to be overblown according to some researchers, and they believe that the challenge presented to these countries by numerous UFOs, USOs, and other possible phenomena in the cold water of the Arctic seas should certainly be more of a priority.